Start the recording. Muy bien. Buenos días a todos. Buenos días. ¿Cómo están ustedes hoy? ¿Están bien? ¿Están bien? Estoy bien. Estoy bien. Di una caminata. I took a hike yesterday, so I'm a little bit, lots of uphill. I'm a little sore. Okay. Me duele la cadera. My hip hurts a little bit today. It was lots of rocky uphill. Ok, lo que vamos a hacer hoy es, vamos a practicar muchísimo con complementos. We're going to practice a lot with these object pronouns, but we're going to try to kind of switch it up a little bit with some visual cues to hopefully make it a little bit easier. This is the last session we'll do with pronouns. We'll start different topic next week para la semana que viene. So what I want to show you is the things you should have nearby. You should have your book nearby because we will reference through the book. Because I'll show you what you should look at and what you shouldn't kind of bother with, because there is some stuff you shouldn't bother with. So you should have that. You should also have, whether you printed it out or whether you want to bring it up on a second screen, if you snap your screens and have two of them up at the same time. This little prompt I gave you, because we'll be working with that, we'll be doing that more like mid towards the end. We're going to do warm up before we get to that, because that was pretty challenging. And we're going to talk about all different ways you could use this to talk about doing activities or actions to people or for people. Okay, so have that ready if you have it printed out or have it up on the second screen. Creo que es todo. I think that's all you need for actual resources. Creo que sí. Okay, vamos a empezar. Okay, los pronombres son a veces difíciles, a veces nos confunden. Sometimes they confuse us a little bit. So what I want to bring back, and Tomas is the only one who will not have seen this. The rest of you guys remember this. Oh, maybe not Jan. Oh, Mariana. Okay, more than one of you. Juanita, she won't remember. Sí, recuerda, she remembered. Okay, so we use these to learn that the way you refer to yourself is yo, right? Okay, bien. But I want you to use these visual cues to think about not how I talk about myself doing something, but somebody doing something to this person, somebody doing something to me. Instead of using yo, it will become me, right? They should take yourselves off of me. It'll become me. Normally, you're talking to a little kid, and if you talk about them doing something, it's tú, no? But if I talk about I do something to you, it becomes te, right? So it's a function of whether these people do the action or receive the action. Do the action or receive the action. Okay. If it's yo with other people, plus means more than me. Me and other people. I'm in a group. So if we're talking about doing the activity, it's nosotros or nosotras. But if somebody does something to us, it's nos. Okay. Now the wonderful thing about mete and nos is that they are very constant. You never have to worry about, is it me or some other word? It's only if it happens to me. If it happens to me, not if I do it, but if it happens to me, we have to plug in that word me. If it happens to you, it has to use te. If it happens to us, it has to be nos. But where it gets confusing is when we talk about other people. Okay, if I talk about one person, right, who is not yo, not tú. But if she does the action, of course, it's
Ella.
ella. But if I do something to her, it becomes
Le.
yeah, le. Now, le, if it's direct object, it'll be la. Depende. So it depends really on what the action is, right? So instead of her doing the action, ella, if she receives it, it's if it's to her, specifically to her or for her, it's le. If, however, I say something like, I'm calling her in an hour, then it is la. So it's that fussy thing of, ooh, is this direct or indirect? This is where it gets tough. Metenos, you don't have to think about, is it direct or indirect? But when you talk about one person or a group of people, then it becomes sticky. And that's the only time it becomes sticky, okay? But to her, le, right? Just call her or see her, then it's direct, then it's la. Normalmente, I talk about him, okay? If he does the action, it's él. If he receives the action, it's
Le.
it's le. If it's indirect, if it's direct, it's lo, right? Lo veo, lo veo. I see him, right? That's direct. But le da, or le doy dinero mañana. I'm giving him money tomorrow. Le doy dinero mañana. Le doy. Okay, le doy. Okay. Le doy dinero mañana. I give him money tomorrow. I'm not giving him away. I'm giving away
The money.
Dinero, money. Yeah. So I know that can't be lo to talk about giving to him, right? Who's getting the money? So the le person, whether it's a guy or a gal or the formal you, right? The le person actually gets the direct object. The le person gets the direct object. If it's money or whatever it is, right? A tip. If you're in a restaurant, right? See? Yeah. So same thing. If we talk about usted, it's also le, because the pronoun for doing something to this guy, like asking him a question, le hago una pregunta. I ask him a question. Le hago, I make a question. Yeah, le hago una pregunta. Or le hago una pregunta. I ask him a question. Or le hago una pregunta. I ask her a question, right? They're all one person entities that I'm doing this to them. Okay, so the only thing we've got to worry about now is the plural. So if they do the action, it's ellos, right? Or if it's an all-gal group, if they do it, it's ellas. But if they receive the action, it's not le, but les, right? Sí, les, okay? So we just put the as on les. Same thing, if you're talking to, an arrow means a you guy sort of situation. To all of you, it's still les. Correcto, no? Okay, so little visual cue for that. Sometimes it helps for people to kind of associate a mental picture with that rather than words. Eventually the words got to come out, but there they go. So, a ver, bueno, entonces, so we have this little cheat sheet. We'll take a quick look and we'll have a quick video. So direct object pronouns, right? Me and nos, me, te, and nos, that triangle, actually this square, this rectangle is always the same. But if they receive the action directly, it's lo or la, los or las. Okay. If it's an indirect object, if you can translate it as the idea of you do something to somebody, you do something for somebody, then metenos, same thing, but le or les. Now, these had an asterisk and were underlined because quite often the le and the les might require some clarification. Unlike lo, which only can mean one thing, or la, which can only mean one thing. Le and les could be a bunch of different entities. Le could be feminine, it could be masculine, it could be the formal you. So sometimes you're going to see an extra clarifying phrase, which means essentially that that word le or that word les is going to become redundant. So in English, we would never say, I'm giving him a gift to Tom. That would sound dumb in English. It's not dumb in Spanish. It's what they may do. If the person who's speaking is not sure, because you were talking about a bunch of people, like you were talking about a bunch of your grandkids, you say, oh, it's this grandkid's birthday. I'm giving him a gift. They might not be sure which person you're referring back to. So, le doy un regalo a Tomás. And you might tag on the a Tomás to make sure that the person you're talking about, because you're talking about all the grandkids, know, they know, oh, you're talking about Tomás with that word le, not Alicia or not, whatever the names of your grandkids are. So sometimes it is going to sound redundant. And then so people say, well, if you're going to say I'm giving Tom a gift, why don't you just forget that word le, forget that word les? It's kind of useless, but to them it is not. Okay, it is more common for them to include a le, even though it sounds redundant. Para que sepan, just so you know, that is kind of a routine thing. Okay, and which
question?
Oh,
Question.
sí, Mariana.
Would it be? It does seem to me a little bit redundant, but would it be incorrect if you did leave off the lay or the lace because it still conveys the same thing?
Okay, because you're right, it conveys the same thing. Could I say, doy un regalo a Tomás? And leave off the le. You could, but it'll sound to them like something's missing a little.
Okay.
Would you be understood? Yes, you would be understood.
Okay.
But it sounds more natural to them to include the le.
Okay.
More often than not, they include the le, even though I know to us it does sound like, well, what this is sort of like useless extra information. It does sound useless and extra, therefore redundant. But it's just what they do. And it's helpful to know. So I want to refer you now, because we're focusing a little more on the metenos le and les today. I want you to take a quick look with me en estas páginas. En la página 164, 165, 164, 165, 164 y 165. It's good if you in your mind don't feel that you are deficient or silly or uneducated because you have a hard time between the le and the les and the lo and the la. Don't feel that way. Es normal. It is very normal because English does not make these distinctions. Okay. But what helps sometimes to know, do I use a le or a les instead of those lo, la, los, las words, is to know which kind of verbs typically will use the le and the les. So the reason 164 and 165 are helpful is that if you kind of get familiar with, oh, these are the kinds of verbs that will use a le, that will use a les, and it's very typical. It's very typical to hear that redundant with this set of verbs, very typical. It helps a little bit, okay? So I'm going to point out particularly. Particularly. The verb, if you're a tourist, cobrar. That very first one, if you're a tourist. Because you may want to ask, how much are you charging me when you get in a cab? Well, and you don't, charging me, that you don't have to worry about le and les, right? ¿Cuánto me cobra? ¿Cuánto me cobra? How much do you charge me, right? But if the taxi driver is talking to you, he's going to use the formal you. And he's going to say, le cobro, I'm charging you. And he's going to assume, because he's looking you in the eyeball, that you know the le means I'm charging you. Le cobro. Para ir al aeropuerto, to go to the airport, le cobro 20, solares, or whatever they use. Okay, whatever monetary unit they use. Okay, so cobrar for services, super importante. Okay, contar, if somebody is telling you a story, you may hear that a lot. Dar, wow, that one almost all the time, because you give something, the direct object, to somebody. And that's indirect, the somebody. Decir, all the time. All the time. I'm telling you, I'm telling him, all the time. Enviar, to send, because you send a thing to somebody. Prestar, all the time, if you lend something to somebody. Comprar and vender are kind of the opposites of each other. Sell something to somebody, buy something for somebody. And traer, but traer is yet kind of a different animal. We're going to talk a little bit next week about traer versus llevar. We'll talk about that, because that's a usage thing. So anyway, when you really look at verbs like cobrar, when somebody's talking to you about what they're going to charge you, dar, decir, maybe enviar if you're in a business setting, those are really, really essential. But all these verbs lend themselves very, very frequently to that whole idea of indirect object pronouns. They will use the le, they will use the les if you're talking about somebody or some people. Okay, I want to take a look at 165, 165. We want to look a little bit right at the bottom of the page, al fondo, way at the bottom. They give us these examples of these redundant phrases that Mariana asked about, which is really, really helpful, because this is a common thing. And they tell you that le is ambiguous, and that means that from context, you probably will know from whatever they were talking about before they get to this sentence. You'll probably know who they mean by le. But if they're not sure that you understand that, they will define it with that repetitive, redundant phrase. And the little phrase will always be way at the end. It'll be the caboose on the train. And it'll start with and then it will name the person. So they give us the examples of María le escribe una carta a usted. María le escribe una carta a él. María le escribe una carta a ella. So that with the name of the person, and it could be a José, a Luis, a Luisa, Veronica. It could be any name, right? And they give you more and more examples, and they give you more examples on 166. Instead of putting an actual first name, they might say, María le escribe una carta a su hermana. So they're trying to give you all the variations, pronouns, first names, or designations, which are not a name, but a su hermana. All the different ways you can hear those combined. Okay. And those redundant phrases are super, super common. So be prepared for, you will hear those tag on what they call clarifying phrases. Es muy común. It is really, really common. I want us to listen to a little short video. Es corto. It is super short. It'll kind of get us refreshed. Keep that book handy. We're going to do some quick exercises here once we finish with the video. Uy, cosa de Zoom. Okay. This is going to give you some examples to get your brain warmed up, to get your brain in the pattern, listening pattern, and speaking pattern.
In this video, we're going to talk about indirect object pronouns, which are pronouns that replace indirect objects. In a sentence or clause, an indirect object answers the questions to whom or for whom. In Spanish, the indirect objects are me, te, le, nos, les, os for vosotros in Spain. Let's look at these in some examples so you can see them in action. In the first example, Mamá, ¿me pasas la sal? Mom, will you pass me the salt? Question, who's doing it and what are they doing? So that's Mamá, and she's passing. Question number 2, what is she passing? La sal, that's the direct object. And question number 3, to whom is she passing the salt? And that's the indirect object. And the pronoun that represents that person is me, or me. So me is the indirect object pronoun, and just like the direct object pronoun, you put it in front of the conjugated verb. Okay, so in this example, we're going to make it a little bit more complicated. Oye, Juan, ¿tenés la tarea? Hey, Juan, do you have the homework? There's no indirect object here, but in the answer, lo siento, amigo, ya le entregué la tarea a la maestra. Sorry, buddy, I already turned in the homework to her.
Okay, and he used a past tense verb. So all you need to know about that word, entregué, is that it's a past. Not I'm turning it in, but I did turn it in. It's over with. Often you hear these used with past tense as well, but you'll hear them with present tense, you'll hear them with commands, you'll hear them with everything.
So turn in what? The homework, the direct object. To whom? To her, or le in Spanish. That's the indirect object pronoun. Sometimes though, her or him or it is too vague. So in Spanish, the prepositional phrase with a or para is used a lot to clarify just who him, her, or it is. Lo siento, amigo, ya le entregué la tarea a la maestra. A la maestra is to the teacher. But it's totally cool to keep the le in front of the verb. This is called the redundant indirect object pronoun. You probably already used the redundant pronoun and you weren't even aware of it. Look at this example. A mí me gusta mucho la pizza. De hecho, a mí me encanta.
Okay, and a long time ago, you had things, how to say I like, right? That you like something. And the way we say that you like is really saying something is pleasing to somebody. So this was another example of a mí me gusta. You can just say me gusta mucho la pizza. It's perfectly okay. But if somebody wants to be very emphatic, they're excited about it. Oh, a mí me encanta. They'll add the a mí on. A mí me gusta. A mí me gusta and me gusta mean the same thing. A mí just makes it more, gets a little more enthusiasm. That's all. A mí me gusta. A mí me gusta. A mí me encanta. A mí me encanta. And saying not just I like it, but I love it. A mí me encanta. So it is essential to have the me gusta. It is essential to have the me encanta. The a mí is just icing on the cake. It's extra. You don't have to say it. You could not substitute a mí gusta. You can't omit the word me. The word me must be in there. You could omit the a mí. You could omit the a mí me encanta, a mí part. Okay.
That phrase, a mí, does nothing but emphasize and articulate to whom the pizza is pleasing, because gustar means to please. So here's a repaso, or review, of the Spanish indirect object pronouns. Hopefully it makes sense to you. If not, feel free to ask questions in the comments at helpinspanish.com.
Okay, bien. So that's just a little quickie to show you. And the me pasas la sal is a great example. Me pasas la sal. You are not, what you are picking up and handing over is not me, the person, it's the salt, la sal, right? So, you know, it's essential that you get that idea. Vamos a ver. I want to take a look at this exercise, este ejercicio, this in writing, before you start speaking freely using this, okay? And we're going to have one other kind of disclaimer, well, probably two other disclaimers. Yes, okay, got it. Here we go. Let's take a look. And the me, the te, the nos, the le won't, it'll be in front of the verb, but the verb doesn't match it in form, right? It's the me, te, nos, le, les, it tells who it happens to. We have to, when we use the verb, we have to look at who does it. So in this first one, en el primer ejercicio, vamos a hacer 10. We're going to do 10 of these examples. Julia is the person doing the activity of writing. ¿Cómo se dice Julia is writing?
Sí.
¿Cómo se dice?
Escribe.
Escribe, right, just escribe. So we're going to stick on the who she's writing to in front of it. To me. Julia.
Me escribe.
Me escribe.
Julia me escribe. Julia me escribe 2 cartas cada semana. She writes me 2 cards every week. Ooh, yeah. That sounds like my mother-in-law. She's a great card writer. Yo no. No suelo escribir mucho. I'm not used to writing a whole lot. And so, por email, escribo muchísimo email, pero con tarjetas no. Jose and Maria, here's, we know right away, they're the people doing that activity of write again. So write is not escribe, it becomes
Escriben.
escriben. So we're gonna say write to us.
Nos
Jose Maria.
Nos escriben.
Nos
No se
escriben.
escribe, no se escribe, no se escribe. Or no se escriben, perdón, no se escriben, escriben. Escriben because they are doing the writing. No se escriben, to us they write. Nos escriben tarjetas desde Barcelona. They're writing us cards from Barcelona. Postcards, right? Okay, and now we've got the give word. And dar es, es irregular para yo. Here it's regular. Carlos?
Da.
Da, okay,
Da.
da. So he gives me is
Me.
me da. Carlos me da la lección de hoy. The thing he's giving is a lesson, la lección. Who gets the lesson? Me. Me is the person getting that lesson. Me da la lección. Yo, I ask.
Pregunto.
Pregunto. I ask you, so depende.
Te pregunto.
Te pregunto. Or formally,
Le.
le pregunto. Oh, well, but because of the tu casa, because of the tu casa, they would have to be te pregunto. But I'm just showing you the different variations they can do here. In this sentence, it would have to be te pregunto because they say, mi tarea está en tu casa, my house is at your house. But le pregunto if it were formal, les pregunto if it was you guys, right? Okay. So say to me, and here's one of the hardest verbs to use, pero muy común, and people use tell, decir. So él, and it's an E to I stem change. Ew, shoot.
Dice.
Él dice. He says to me becomes él.
Me dice.
Él
me dice que su hermana vive en Nueva York. He says to me, he tells me. Tells is the same verb. Me dice, he tells me. This verb decir is used with that le and les and the metenos all the time. Is probably the most common thing to hear conversationally. The number one most common verb. Le dice. Okay. Le dice. Ella, she lends. Prestar to lend.
Presta.
Prestar.
Presta.
Presta. And lends it to him becomes
Le presta.
le presta su bolígrafo. Le presta. And bolígrafo they would use in Spain and Colombia, but yeah, if you're in Mexico, it'd be pluma, right? So differences in word usage. Nosotros with teach, enseñar, enseñamos. And now you're teaching to a group of people. Ana y José.
Les.
Les.
Enseña.
This.
Les
Enseñamos.
enseñamos a hablar español. Les enseñamos a hablar español. We teach them. Okay.
So you
Ellos,
can we say les enseñamos a José y Ana, a Ana y José?
Sí. Sí
Yeah.
se puede. Yes, you can.
Okay.
Yes, you can. Okay. Bien. Ellos, and we got bring, traer.
Traen.
Traen. Okay. Traen and bring us.
Nos
Traen
traen.
café con leche a mi oficina. Nos traen café con leche. Bien. Okay. Now we've got Joe with that tell again. Decir. Digo, muy irregular. Digo. It's one of those yo verbs. They're those salgo, tengo, vengo. Okay, now we've got digo, and that's the double whammy because it's go, but it also goes from decir, de, to di, right? Not dego, but digo. Digo. So yo digo, I tell him.
Le digo.
Le digo a los resultados de la elección. Le digo. And the le digo, you hear all the time. Le digo que sí, le digo que no. Le digo que sí, I tell him sure. Le digo que sí. Que sí, that yes. I tell him that yes. You hear that a lot. Or te digo que no. I tell you not to. Do something, right? Okay, and now we've got a double whammy. We've got a double. So ask the cab driver. Yo pregunto, right? Pregunto. So I asked the cabbie guy. Yo
Le
Pregunto.
pregunto.
How much you charging me? Here's what you'll typically say.
¿Cuánto me cobra?
Obra.
Me cobra. ¿Cuánto me cobra usted? ¿Cuánto me cobra usted? This would be something you very typically need if you're a tourist. ¿Cuánto me cobra usted? Cobra usted, you're charging me. Think of a cover charge to get into a bar. Cover charge. Cobrar. And remember that, the B and the V sound alike. Cover charge. How much you cover me? ¿Cuánto me cobra? How much you gonna charge me? ¿Cuánto me cobra? Okay, right? So now we're gonna stop there because the next one gets complicated. So we're gonna stop. Es otra cosa. It's another thing. It's using double verbs. We're not doing that yet. We'll do it another time. We're not doing it yet. Okay. Vale. Entonces, we're going to set into we're going to seg into your scripted questions. Now, I'm going to send you off into groups to do this, but before we do that, I want to ask if you have any questions about anything, any of the general situations I gave you with this sheet. I can say there are 15 of them. Yeah. So now,
Marilyn,
yeah, see.
could I ask you about one of the exercises we just did in the
Oh,
book?
sí, claro, sí.
Number 10, I'm not understanding the first part of that question. It's yo le pregunto, is that right?
Yo le pregunto, I ask
Okay.
him. Yo
I ask
pregunto,
him.
I ask a question.
I guess
Pregunto.
what I'm not understanding is the pregunto, because that to me goes with like the me. And I was wondering why it wasn't pregunta.
Okay, let me show you the difference, Nora. Pregunto tells who's making the question. Pregunto, I'm asking. I'm asking that guy. Le pregunto. I can't use me. Uh-oh, I could use me, but here's how it changes the meaning. There is such a phrase as me pregunto. Me pregunto is a thing. Me pregunto means I'm asking myself. Whoever would say that, I ask myself, that's how you say I wonder. The way you translate the idea of, I wonder, if you wonder, you're asking
Yourself.
You're not asking some Joe Schmo. You're asking yourself, I wonder. You're talking it over in your own mind, aren't you? So somebody may very well say, me pregunto. Me pregunto. Me pregunto si tienen, I wonder if they have such a thing in the store. Me pregunto would mean I ask myself, therefore I wonder. Le pregunto, the le is telling who I'm asking the question. Does that make sense, Nora? Yeah. Yeah. See? Oh, and I can't hear you.
Oh, I think so. It's still a little fuzzy, but I'll keep working on the exercises.
Yeah. So, okay, you've had these reflexives, like me siento, I sit down. Me levanto, I get up, right? In reflexives, the me matched the verb form. Me siento. Me lavo las manos. I'm doing it, but I'm doing it to myself, right? In all those reflexives, I'm doing the action, but I also receive the action. With these, I'm doing the action to somebody.
Okay, so since I'm doing the action, I have to use that form of the verb.
The verb goes according to who does it.
Gotcha. Okay.
The verb does match up with me siento because I'm seating myself. I'm lowering my butt to the chair. Me levanto, I'm lifting my butt out of the chair. So I am doing the action, but I am also the receiver of the action in reflexive. But in non-reflexive, I ask this guy how much he's going to charge me. I'm asking him the question and it becomes le. But I'm doing the action. The verb has to go according to who does it.
Okay.
The verb always tells the story of who does it.
That makes sense.
And that is a normal, para que sepan, so that you guys know, that is a very normal thing for us to get tripped up by. Es muy normal. It is really, really, it is the usual kind of question that I would expect people to have. Yeah? Okay.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank
Yeah.
you.
There is no such thing as a bad question because, or a dumb question, because that is a normal reaction for English speakers to have. Okay.
Marilyn,
Sí.
tengo una pregunta. Does it matter where we place the clarification, whether before or after the direct object.
Es buena pregunta, Suwai. Sí. Okay, I'm thinking about that because depende, depends a little bit.
Okay.
In
I
a
have-
phrase like, a mí me gusta, a mí me gusta, in that kind of setup, the a mí usually leads off. So in other words, like that example they showed you, a mí me gusta mucho la pizza. It would be more usual to hear the a mí me gusta. To say me gusta la pizza a mí, nah, I just don't do that. But with these kind of verbs that we're not using the me gusta thing today. We're using other kinds of verbs, right? We're not talking about like, oh, that thing gives pleasure to me. We're using the normal verbs like charge money, like give something, like say something to you or to him or to all those people. With these kind of like more normal run-of-the-mill sort of verbs, it is more usual to have the a phrase tagged way at the end.
Okay.
More usual. So I'm going to give you some examples. I'm going to run down this, I'm going to run down about half this list before I send you out to practice, because some of you may have like created some little examples and maybe you weren't quite sure and you need to tweak it a little bit beforehand. So I'm going to give you about like 5 or 6, cinco, seis. And I'm going to switch it up a little bit to show you how we can change it around a little bit. Okay, so if I want to talk about my husband giving something to me, okay, all these things in caps, we're telling you which pronoun you need, whether it's me, te, nos, le, or les. So the big takeaway is if it's in great big caps, that word has to become a me or a te or a nos or a le or a les, according to who the caps refer to. So my husband, or if you're a guy and your wife is giving you something, what I wanted you to do is to know how you conjugate that verb dar, and this related back to Nora's question.
Down.
The non-caps person, the mi esposo, tells you what you have to do with dar, that it has to become
Down.
da. It can only be da. It can't be anything else, right? And algo, something. So I'm going to plug in a something. Instead of saying algo, something wishy-washy, you know, something, I'm going to make it something specific. Mi esposo me da
Me da.
flores. Mi esposo me da flores. Para el día de enamorados. Mi esposo me da flores. My husband gives me flowers. Si mi esposo fuera Elon Musk, y no lo es, and he is not. Si mi esposo fuera, if my husband were, si mi esposa fuera Elon Musk, sí, me daría, he would give me, me daría un Tesla. Pero no lo es, but he's not. Pero no lo es, okay? Okay, so I can make that present, me da. If it already happened, I could change that verb from da to dio, gave. Now, most of you don't know past. Tomas knows a little past, or maybe some of you have in the past, you know, have studied past a little bit. But so know that that verb da can go into any time setting you want it to be. You can make it, he's going to give. Me va a dar. Me va a dar. I can say he's going to give me. Me va a dar. And then me still goes in front of the verb. Me va a dar. It could just be me da. It could be me dio. He gave me. So no matter what time frame the verb dar is used in, the me will always be in front of that verb. Comprenden, understand? Okay. Now, most of you are not going to be using past. Some of you may know something about that and may want to make it past. That's fine. Para que sepan, just so you know. Okay, let's look at dos. Now, it's to my kids. So that's got to become only one thing. It's got to become
Les.
this, okay? Because it's to my kids. And I'm doing the action, so that has to go into the
Doy.
right, doy. I'm probably going to drop that word yo because doy says it all. There's no reason. There's no reason to use yo anymore. So it's just doy. But
But you can still use it? I mean, if you
Very
use
seldom.
it, is it wrong or is
It
it
isn't-
okay?
Buena pregunta. No es incorrecto. It is not incorrect. They just don't bother, usually.
So in a conversation, you usually just omit the yo. You
It is
don't use
more
the yo?
usual to omit the yo.
Ah,
It is
Okay.
more usual. It does not make it wrong to use yo, but most
Okay.
people will just drop it because doy says everything.
okay.
Okay.
All right.
So
Okay.
usually it could sound, Juanita, like yo les doy, but it will be more commonly said as les doy.
Let's do it. Okay.
Les doy dinero cada semana. Les doy dinero cada semana. If I want to add, oh,
Hijos.
yes, where do I stick that if I say hijos? If I want to say hijos and make it very specific, it becomes this. Les doy dinero
Hijo?
a
A
mis hijos.
Oh,
A
mis-
mis hijos. Les doy dinero a mis hijos cada semana.
Good.
Les doy dinero a mis hijos cada semana. The a mis hijos is going to get tagged on towards the end. You could even say les doy dinero cada semana a mis hijos. You can tag it on that part at the end. That's okay. Okay, bien. So the two you guys is a big group, right? So it becomes the word
Les.
les. So, but la maestra is very specific with escribir. It's got to be
Escribe.
Escribe.
escribe. So, la maestra les
Les
escribe un correo
un correo.
electrónico. Bien? And you get the idea. I'm not going to do too many more. Maybe no more, because I think by this time you've got the idea. So that word escribe could become va a escribir, is going to write, for future. It can become escribió if you knew past, right? It can stay in present. The escribir can go into any time phase you want it to go over.
Would you
as
mind
long
to
as-
say it again? What do you say that when it's like it's going to right? Is it
going to?
escribe?
Yeah, okay, so let me take this off and I'll show you, let's take the escribir example because I can write in the chat box more easily for this. Let's say I want to use this escribir and you want to talk about, I'm sending a whole bunch of people emails. Yep, I'm sending it to all these people. Les escribo is I'm writing them. Now that can be, les escribo can mean I'm writing them now. It can mean near future. Present tense is often used for very near future. Not for 5 months from now. That's too far out in the future. But es normal decir, les escribo un email en 2 horas. Les escribo un email en 2 horas. And then it will be implying I will do that in 2 hours, en 2 horas. You can use present to say very near future. But if I want to say that I'm going to be doing this more indefinite, like way in the future, it becomes Les voy a escribir. Now that gives a little bit more into the future. Les voy a escribir. And the les is still in front of the going to do it part, right? Les voy a escribir. But now I'm making it future. For those of you, there are a few of you who may know a little bit of past. You don't have to use past, but perdón. I changed the person there. We're talking yo here. Les escribí. Les escribí, I wrote to them. I wrote to them, if it's the I. Les escribí. Les escribió is he wrote to them or she wrote to them, but les escribí, I wrote to them. Les escribí. Okay? You don't have to use past, but just so you know, that verb can go into whatever tense it needs to be. Yeah? Okay?
Yeah.
If you're comfortable with present, keep it with present. If you want to do a true future, you conjugate ir, you have to use the little word a and then the infinitive. So, es posible. That's a possible, those are possible ways to do that. Okay, vale. Can I send you out into breakout rooms, or do you have a question for me before I send you out to breakout rooms? None?
No.
Okay. Okay, bien. I want you to practice with these. If you come up with oh shoot, we didn't know what to do with number, whatever, we'll come back to that and revisit that when you finish. 5 or 6. 7, you think?
Yeah, it's good.
Okay, más o menos. More or less. Okay. Let me do some work. I'm going to try to get you into groups of 3. Perfecto. Yes, groups of 3. Okay, one of you is going to have a group of 2, but that's okay. Fantastico. I'm going to give you time to chat. If you have any speed bumps in the road, come back and tell me. Do hit the join button right now. And the join button will take you off. Ok. Aquí vienen todos. Everybody coming back in pronto, soon. Casi todos. And make sure you take yourselves off of mute. Got everybody back? Casi todos. Oh, yeah, sí. Todos están. Everybody's back, I think. Fantástico. Okay. ¿Tienen preguntas? Do you have any questions about what you did there? Or something that didn't go quite so easily?
Yes,
Sí.
number 12.
Okay.
Cinco.
5.
Sí.
Okay. Nuestro amigo.
So
Our.
we were pondering whether when we said us, whether that's Trey or Trey-in, since it was a single amigo, but it was bringing it to us.
Okay. So what was confusing is how the nuestro and the amigo affects that word traer. Okay. So
Mhm.
who traer to bring, right?
Right.
Who's doing the bringing?
The amigo.
Right. Okay. Our friend, our friend. So that nuestro has nothing to do with what the verb is going to do.
Right. Right.
So who is the human being? The human being who's doing the traer is not us, it's amigo. So it's just like saying él or ella or usted.
Right. To be he, since it's amigo, so it'd be L. Right.
Exacto.
Okay.
So it's trae.
Okay.
Trae. But
Is it
brings.
Nos trae.
Nos trae. Perfecto. Sí, Tomás. Nos trae. Nos trae. Nos trae.
We, in truth, there was a lot of educating all three of us about understanding. So we didn't even get past number 5.
Okay.
But in full disclosure, just sharing. So.
Do I need to give you more time?
Well, I don't know how others did. I don't.
Okay.
It's just sharing with you that's our week.
Should we take some time with? Should we do a quick once over with 6 to the bottom? Para que sepa. ¿Sí? Bien. Okay. Vale. Okay. So número 6. Miro aquí número 6. I'm looking at 6. Miro número 6. To you is going to be, because we're saying tu amigo, your friend, it's going to be the friendly you. So it's going to be the te word, right? Desgraciadamente, tu amigo no te dice la verdad. No te dice la verdad. I will write it in here. Tu amigo no te dice la verdad. Tu amigo no te dice la verdad. No te dice. Dice because amigo is who's doing that. Who's doing that. And the te meaning who's being spoken to. Who's listening. Who's doing the listening, and is the te, right? Bien. To his sweetie. To his sweetie. Manuel le dice que él ama. Manuel le dice. Le dice Manuel, I should include Manuel. Voy a incluir Manuel. Manuel le dice que él la ama. Manuel tells her that he loves her. Que él la ama, that he loves her. Que él ama, he loves, la ama. Who does he love? He loves her. Él ama. But the important part here is the le dice. Manuel le dice, he tells her. He says something. The something is what he says. That's the direct object, the something, right? But he says it to her. Le dice que él ama, okay? Señora Ramos.
Le.
And remember, the Señora Ramos is the person receiving it, right? So we will not even include the tú. It's just cuentas. Oh, and we need the pronoun in front of it. Le cuentas toda la historia. And historia looks like history, but it really means a story.
Stories.
Le cuentas, cuentas because tú, here's the person doing the telling. And the le tells who we're telling it to. Le cuentas toda la historia. If I want to make this redundant, here's how I do this. I say a la señora Ramos. Le cuentas toda la historia a la señora Ramos. So if you want to be redundant, the a señora Ramos matches up with telling me more about who le is.
Can you say a ella?
Sure. Sí,
Okay.
claro.
Sí, okay.
Yeah, you can make that way, way, way shorter and just say a ella.
Mhm.
Would it be a la Señora Ramos or a Señora Ramos?
It's a la señora Ramos. Okay. Una mini lección, una lección muy, muy, muy cortita. Really, really short lesson. Honorifics, titles. Titles, I think, like things like Mr., Mrs., Miss, Professor, Doctor. Okay. When you use those kind of titles, if I talk to the person using the title, I just use the title by itself. Señora Ramos. Doctor Hernández. Profesor Gomez. Okay. But if I talk about the person, not directly to them, but about them, I have to bring in the el or the la. So, le cuentas toda la historia a la señora Ramos, because I'm talking about señora Ramos. The el or the la comes into it. Or, le digo al profesor Ramírez. I tell Professor Ramirez, I'm talking about him. I'm not talking to him eye to eye.
Gracias.
De nada. Now, if you forget that, is it the end of the world? No, it's not. But it's what sounds correct to them. Okay, bien. Vale. Bueno, 9. Amazon, and Amazon is what does this, ¿verdad? Amazon, Amazonas, to us. So they sell it to us, it becomes the nos. Nos vende muchas cosas. Amazon sells us lots of stuff.
Things.
Amazon nos vende muchas cosas. There is no need to make that redundant. The nos es obvio. It's really, really super obvious. So it would be very, very unusual to make that redundant. I mean, you could, but it would not be necessary. It would be kind of overkill. So the kid doesn't tell his dad or anything. El hijo
Le.
No, no le dice
No le
nada.
dice.
No le dice nada. No le dice nada. No le dice nada. If you want to make it redundant, we add on an
No
a
le dice nada
su papá,
su
a su papá, o a su padre, a su padre, a su papá. The a su papá just lets you know that the le is a man, a guy, dad. You don't have to have the a su papá. El hijo no le dice nada a su papá. No le dice nada. No le dice nada. There's the essential. The a su papá is icing on the cake. Okay. And we're talking about, serving dessert. Serving dessert. El camarero. Camarero, some places may call him a mesero instead of a camarero. Now, serves formal you. Oh, we're talking about formal because restaurants are a formal setting. So serves you is le sirve. Le sirve el postre. If you want to make it redundant, a usted. A usted. But the le sirve, the le is the part that's essential. El camarero le sirve. Le sirve. He serves you. The maitre d' may come over and tell you, hey, waiter guy is going to be bringing your dessert very soon. And camarero le sirve el postre. Muy pronto, very, very soon, muy pronto. Le sirve. Okay? Le sirve. Bien. To me. And as a question, como una pregunta. Perdón. Aquí. To me. Okay. And this kind of does so to me.
Yeah. Tricky.
Me puedes traer la cuenta.
Can you also put the may on the end of traer?
Oh, ding, 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 ding. A plus. Wow. Here, how is this different from everything else? Yep, this is something that happens a lot. Okay. What have we got here? We've got not one verb, but two. Okay, so when I have a two verb setup and they're working right next to each other, that means conjugated verb, infinitive, the AR-ER-IR. There are two things possible and both are correct. And one is not more common than the other. It depends on what the person feels like saying. So what do you think we could also do with this? Jeffrey, dime, tell me what you think we could do.
Puedes traerme la cuenta.
Exacto. Los dos son correctos. The two are correct.
And question 2 on the person of the verb. I put puedes to begin with, and then I began to think that would that be more formal and do puede?
That is more formal. So, if you went into this cafe a lot, here's the difference. If you're a regular,
You do puedes.
yeah. So I don't want to mislead. If you're a regular at a place, you may speak with, and you get this waiter a lot, you may speak on a tú basis with him. But the more formal thing, if you're just going in first time, it would be formal. So how would that change? It will change in that verb will not be puedes. It'll be a formal you that you're using. It'll be
Puede.
puede traerme la cuenta. Puede traerme la cuenta, or sí, or me puede traer.
Are you writing in the chat box?
Oh, perdón, I am so sorry. No, I'm typing in the share screen. That is terrible. Es terrible. This is terrible. Perdón. Gracias. Thank you. Terrible oversight on my part. Let's back all the way up. Here's the le cuentas.
Yeah.
Uy, qué horrible soy yo. How horrible I am today. Amazon nos vende muchas cosas. El hijo no le dice nada a su papá. El camarero le sirve el postre a usted. Gracias, muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much for telling me. I went from chat box mentality to this, and that does not help anybody. ¿Me puedes traer la cuenta? ¿Puedes traerme la cuenta? The two of those are equally cool. Okay. So the me, this is a double verb, because of the double verb thing. If I have two verbs working together, right? I have two places I can correctly use this with. And people, one will not be more common than the other. It's whatever somebody feels like saying. And the more formal, of course, is using not puedes, can you, but puede, can you. And when you're looking at them, you don't usually bother with the usted, you can, but you know, if you're looking at the guy and talking to him, he knows that you mean you when you say puede. Puede traerme la cuenta, me puede traer la cuenta. You can leave off the word usted there. That's a normal thing to do.
So you combine me into the verb, traerme,
Yes,
make it into
and
one.
it all gets smushed on the end. It all becomes one word.
Oh,
Ah.
okay.
Now, and that's going to hold true in some other situations, but more. So let's expand on this just a little bit, un poquito, a little bit, because we've got the time. This is the segment where I said, oh, we're going to stop with the book. I'll have you go look at that next week, just as kind of icing on the cake. Let's say, me puede traer, me puede traer. Let's say instead of, there are a whole bunch of verbs that might be used as two things together. So can bring, going to bring, if you want to bring something, right? I mean, okay, want to bring with a waiter doesn't make sense because it's not what he wants, but you know, in a social situation, like, you know, oh, I want to bring some food to the party, it might be pertinent. There's certain double verb combinations that make a lot of sense, okay? So can do something, going to do something, because you want to put something into future, okay? It could be, and I'm going to form it not as a question, but as a statement here. So we're going to give this a little bit of space. Voy a, or vas. Vas a traerme más comida.
Sí.
Vas a traerme más comida. Oh, well, we will make that a question. We will make it. Vas a traerme más comida. Uy. The hardest thing to get on my keyboard is to get the punctuation right. Vas a traerme más comida. Here's another two verb setup. Vas, meaning I'm putting it into the future. Are you going to do this? Vas a traerme. But I can flip that me way up front. And that is also considered okay. Me vas a traer más comida. So I can put the me in either position there. Okay. I can use it with querer if you want. Okay. I'm going to change it up a little bit here. I'm going to make it a quiero. I want. Quiero, quiero darte unos consejos I want to give you some advice. Quiero darte unos consejos. I want to give you some advice. Quiero darte. Quiero darte. I can tag it onto the end of that infinitive and it all becomes one word. Or te quiero dar unos consejos. And either one of those is considered okay. If I have a two-verb thing working together. Now, there are other situations where you may tag on a may. We're not going to talk about them yet because it involves, again, kind of two verb things working together, but in a different way. And it's kind of a little much. There are some other situations where you can tag it on, but they're only specific ways. Oh, those commands. I gave you the video that showed you all the commands, like siéntate, sit down. Yeah. If you're telling somebody, go do that. Like bring me, like you say to the waiter, bring me the bill. But now instead of saying, can you do it, which is a question, and just giving him a command, bring me, in that situation, you don't get a choice. With me puedes traer la cuenta or puedes traerme la cuenta, you have a choice. If you turn that into an order, saying, hey, do it, okay? And first of all, you'll probably be nice and start with por favor. Por favor, tráigame la cuenta. Or tráigame la cuenta, por favor. You can tag the por favor on the end. Tráigame la cuenta, por favor. Por favor, tráigame la cuenta. Tráigame la cuenta, por favor. I can put the por favor on the end too. But tráigame, when this becomes an order, you're telling somebody, do this, then you don't get a choice. You must tag it onto the end. And very commonly, if people are giving, to waiters, you do give an order. It sounds really formal to say you're giving an order to somebody, but you do that all the time, Yeah. We do that a lot. They do that a lot too. So you will hear these mete no leles tagged on to an order. You may hear them tagged on when it's a two-verb combination. Para que sepan, so you know. Okay, bien? So, Jeffrey, tenías buena pregunta. You had a good question. We'll finish up these, take a quick look. Two customers. So I'm doing this to you guys. It's not an order. It's just a statement. It's a statement of fact. I'm saying, I'm going to do this. I'm going to send this to you guys. So yo affects what we do with enviar, right? And I'm going to get rid of the yo because I don't need the yo anymore. So the customers is going to come right up front. Les
envío.
Envío. And this has an accent mark on the I. I don't expect you to know that. Les envío. Les envío la información. Les envío la información. Les envío la información. I don't have a choice of what I can do that. I could have a choice if I said, les voy a enviar la información. Les voy a enviar. Then I can say les voy a enviar or voy a enviarles la información. Okay, so this is getting you prepped for the homework bit. Right? But just les envío la información. That can mean I am sending you the information right now, or I'm going to do it like shortly. That can mean kind of out into the future, just a little bit. Okay, to your spouse or to the spouse. Somebody's spouse, to Anita's spouse, to her hubby. And I'll probably keep Anita so that I know who's doing it. Anita
Le compré.
le compra. Anita le compra. Anita compra. Anita compra. Anita buys. Anita compra. Anita le compra. She buys him. And she's not literally purchasing him. She's purchasing something for him. Anita le compra un regalo especial.
A su esposa.
And you can add on a su esposo. A su esposo. This a su esposo can become icing on the cake, the extra, if you don't know if she's buying it for her kid or for her grandkid or for her husband. If we don't know who the le is, we can tag on an a su esposo. Anita le compra un regalo especial a su esposo. Bien? Le compra. And you're talking. Oh, okay. Makes sense? Okay, bien. Okay, to the receptionist. And now I'm not asking information, preguntar. I'm asking for something. I want something. I want an actual thing. And if you want an actual thing, if you're asking for a thing, then it becomes a different verb, pedir. Pedir. So we're going to conjugate pedir for yo. And that, oh, it's like the digo, it goes to an E, a letter I. And we just need pido. But I need to say I'm asking the guy or the gal who's a recepcionista. So that becomes le, right? Le pido la llave de la habitación. Le pido la llave. I ask for a thing. Le pido la llave de la habitación. Bien? Okay, and the le means I'm asking that one person, whoever it is, whether it's a man or a woman. Le pido also, I can tag on al recepcionista or a la recepcionista if it's a gal, depends on the sex of the person, right? Okay, bien? ¿Tienen preguntas? Do you have any questions about these? ¿Sí o no?
No.
No?
Una pregunta regarding
Sí.
recepcionista.
Uh-huh.
Would it be recepcionista, the A ending with whether it's a male or a female?
Yes. Ista
Okay.
never changes.
Okay.
But it might become, por ejemplo, if it's a lady, I will just change it to la recepcionista. Ista is an odd kind of suffix, a thing we stick on the end of a word. Ista never changes to isto. Ista is always ista, whether it's a man or a woman, it's always ista. El artista, artist. La artista, a woman who's an artist. El pianista, a man who plays piano. La pianista, a woman who plays piano. See? So the ista, el dentista, la dentista. It's always ista, you just tag on an el or a la in front of it. See? Yeah, it looks like it, which you should make it isto. But we don't do that. Okay. Vale, bien. ¿Hay más preguntas? Any other questions on that? ¿Sí o no? No? Okay. I am going to give you a preview. Una prevista. I'm going to give you a preview of what we're going to do. We're going to go away from the world of pronouns for a little bit. We won't go totally away in that we may inject them and use them. But we're going to go away from that a little bit next week. Next week, we're going to start to look at some verbs that are confusing to use that are common. And that's all I'm going to say about them. Some verbs get confused, like when to use llevar versus when to use traer, because in a restaurant you need that. Because llevar means to transport something, move it around. But traer means to bring something. But there are specific situations where it makes sense to use llevar and not to use traer, or vice versa. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And we're also going to talk about preguntar and pedir. Preguntar and pedir. We're going to talk about those two verbs. So verbs that have different meanings, or verbs that have different definitions, okay? But I am going to give you one last thing to do, and it's that double verb thing. So, para, tarea. For homework out of the book, I am going to give you, ¿cuál? Algo breve, something brief. Okay, en la página. Okay, I'm just making sure they were using it with verbs. En la página 168, 168, there's a very mini lesson that will use this idea of two verbs and what do you do with the pronoun. So I want you to try that because it's only 5. Hay cinco, there are 5. I want to see if you know the 2 places that the verb can go. Both of them are correct. And they're using want to tell, going to lend, going to write, going to sell, and want to lend. That's what they're using. So they're using a 2-verb setup. I want to see if you can use the verb, or the pronoun, the pronoun in both positions, because they're both correct. I want you to do just that little one. And I want you to do also a little reading out of the book, because it's going to, en la página 175, 175. There's a little reading called El viaje, the trip, okay? And you're going to see little pronouns salted and peppered through the whole little story there. So they're going to use it with some verbs you haven't had yet, which is okay, because it's good to get accustomed to that in a variety of situations. But you're going to see how it's used with single verbs, with doubled up verbs, with some unusual verbs like me parece, it seems to me. So some of them will be a little bit harder than others, but it's a typical kind of reading situation. Yeah, you may want to take a look at the questions after it on the following page at the very, very bottom. And it's got some vocabulary to help you with vocabulary you may not know. So do take a look at those 2 pages. So you'll have a reading, you'll have a short exercise, but then we're going to start something brand new with some verbs that either have double meanings or you use one in one situation and not in another. So things that are kind of helpful in that set. Está bien? Is that good? So it'll be a more vocabulary, context, situation based next week, la semana que viene. Vale. Bueno. Fantástico.
No.
Okay. Y eso es todo. I think that'll be enough para un día, sí, one day. Vale, bien. Okay?
Okay.
Muy bien.
Gracias.
De nada. Hasta la semana que viene. Espero que todos tengan buena semana. Que todos tengan buena semana. That you may all have a nice week.
You too.
Gracias. Muchísimas gracias.
Gracias.
Hasta luego.
Adiós.
Adiós.
Bye.